What's up, everybody? How's it going? We're going to be doing another quick video on how to make yourself a better SCA fighter, and myself too. One of the underlying things that keeps coming up in 95% of these 5 method videos is high intensity interval training versus sustained conditioning or sustained heart rate training. And in today's video, we are going to be going over both of them and why they're both important. So if you want to know the difference, this video is for you. All right, so first of all, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going over what exactly is high intensity interval training. High intensity interval training is when you high intensity interval training is basically what exactly is HIIT training, and why do these guys keep bringing it up in all these videos, and why is it so important to you as a fighter? HIIT training is high intensity interval training. So when you break it down, high intensity means super high heart rate. At least if you have like some way to monitor it, you're going to be wanting around 75% of your max heart rate plus. I wouldn't go over 95%, depending on how young you are. If you're getting up there in age, definitely stick to that 75%. Now, if you don't know what your max heart rate is, a quick way to figure that up is 220. Take the number 220 and subtract it from your age, and then you just take 75% of that, and that's your max. That's where you want to aim for when you're doing high intensity interval training. So high intensity is 75% or 90 to 95% of your max heart rate, depending on your age. Interval is taking a rest period shortly after you hit that peak heart rate. And then training is obviously a duration of time that you're doing this. So the key to getting it done and doing it correctly is hitting that 75% and sustaining it for 30, 45 seconds, 20, 30, 45 seconds, and then immediately stopping and taking a break. So if you watch any of Duke Dietrich's videos, he does 20 seconds on, 10 seconds of rest. And he does it that way because it simulates fighting. It simulates when you're swinging with somebody, bam, bam, fighting, throwing shots, doing this, doing that. And then typically what happens is the fighters will separate out and they'll take 10 seconds and recoup and reevaluate what just happened in the fight. And if you do that in your pel work or when you're training, what's going to happen is it's going to help you recover faster. So that's why it's really important to be training that way, is because it simulates the way that we fight in tournament styles, at practice, and various other times in our sport. So making sure that you can do that and recover, or somewhat recover, in those brief moments in the fight when you're reevaluating, when each fighter is like, okay, what the hell just happened? It's called active rest. You're still in the moment, your heart rate is still elevated, but it's coming down very quickly. And high intensity interval training helps you train that, because like I said before, you take 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and you just go all out as hard as you can, and as fast as you can, and you get your heart rate spiked, shoot it way up there. And then as soon as that timer is up, you stop, you take a step back, and you just take some deep breaths, get that heart rate to come back down. And the more you do it, the faster your heart rate comes down and the faster you recover. So that's why it's important, but let's kind of go into a little bit more of the science behind it, okay? So when you do that, it really expands upon your fast twitch muscle fibers. Those are type 2. Think of like a sprinter versus a marathoner. Sprinters are usually going to be a little bit bigger. They're going to have more muscle tone. They're going to have more muscle, period. They're going to look a little bit more ripped, if you will. I'm not saying they're going to be like a power lifter or a bodybuilder or something like that, but they're going to have those type 2 muscle fibers, so they're going to be a little bit bigger, and they're going to have a lot more explosive power, because you're literally going from a stop to a start. A good way to look at it is how Duke Sean refers to when you start a shot, the hardest point is starting the shot. And so starting the shot is the hardest part, and therefore it requires more muscle. But once it's started, it's easier to just follow through, right? So it's the same thing with your muscles. So the more muscle you have, the easier it's going to be for your body to just initially get that jolt of energy and move forward as fast as it can. And that's where type 2 muscle fibers come in. They burn more carbohydrates. You need them. You need more carbohydrates when you have more type 2 muscle fibers, because they need energy now. Carbohydrates are a very, very fast burning fuel, especially if you eat like sugars or fruits, candy bars, etc., so on and so forth. That's why they offer those things at events when you're out there in melees or in longer tournaments. They offer you carbohydrates to keep your body fueled up, and they're going to burn faster and hit your muscle tissue a lot sooner. If you want more information on that, definitely look right up in this area for a link about how to fuel up for fighting. I go into this a little bit more there too. So that's a little bit more of the muscle tissue, and the science behind those type 2 muscle fibers. I don't want to go too far into it because that gets pretty boring for a lot of people. But if you want me to, or you want to ask more questions about it, feel free to hit those comments, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'm hoping to do more videos like this. So anyway, moving forward, now let's go into the type of workouts that you could do for high intensity interval training. High intensity interval training, like I said before, is getting your heart rate spiked up. If you don't have like a heart rate monitor or something like that, a good way to tell when your heart rate is super elevated is if you're running or you're doing something and you can't talk. If you can't talk and maintain a conversation while you're doing the movement, you know you're right where you need to be when it comes to high intensity interval training, or just below it. Like, you can spout out 1 or 2 word sentences. I know that's not really punctual or accurate when it comes to English language, but if you could say 1 or 2 words and be coherent about what's going on around you, that's probably just below where you want to be, but it's also okay to be at that point too if you're beginning, if you're just starting out. So if you can't talk, or you can only use 1 or 2 words to respond to somebody talking to you, that's where you want to be during those 30 seconds, 20, 30, 45 second intervals. And then during your rest periods, that just kind of depends on you. If you're new at interval training, definitely take a little bit longer period. But then as you get adjusted to that, or it gets easier and easier to maintain, shorten your rest periods, and then try to push a little bit harder during your workout periods. So you could do this with running outside. You could do it on like a Stairmaster if you have one of those. You could do it on a row machine, Concept 2 row machines. You could do it with body weight exercises, squats, push-ups, sit-ups, burpees, God forbid those godforsaken things. You could do it with jump rope. You could do it with pel work. Like I said, Dietrich has a lot of videos on that. I'll put a video up on this side somewhere up here, right? You could go into those kind of videos. You could do it with that. But remember, if you are doing it on the pel, you can swing fast, but don't hit hard because you'll tear up your joints. So make sure that you're always going slow on the pel. So really, anything that gets your heart rate elevated and you can push really hard and get to that point of not being able to hold a conversation and go from there. So those are the types of workouts that you could do for that. If you need something specific for you, or if you have like an injury, again, don't hesitate to reach out. I can help you out. This is kind of my thing. I love helping people. I went to school for it, so on and so forth. And I've trained countless people. So if you need like a clock or something like that, you can find all kinds of Tabata timers, T-A-B-A-T-A timers online. Search in any of your app store. There's plenty of different interval training apps that you can find that'll help you. You can find anything like that online, right? So just find some kind of a type timer or something like that that makes noise so you can hear it when to start and when to stop. Okay, so that's high intensity interval training and why it's important. So next we're going to go into sustained conditioning or sustained heart rate conditioning. So what it is essentially is whenever you go for like a 3-mile run or a mile run or a half marathon or a marathon, if you're a crazy person, you're going to get your heart rate up slightly, probably between 45 to 50%, maybe 65 if you're pushing a little bit harder, but no more than that. And then you're keeping it up there and you're sustaining it for a long period of time. And we're talking, if you want to do it correctly, you want to be at least 45 minutes to an hour or more. Okay, it's important because to fighters especially is when you are in a melee or you're in a tournament, your body needs to be able to be adjusted to working out for an extended period of time. And most tournaments take at least 2 hours, 2-3 hours or more. And most melees last all day, especially at SCA. You're fighting from about 10 a.m. to about 2-3 p.m. and there's about 10-minute breaks in between each scenario while they set up for the next one. And so you do have rest periods, which is awesome and helps you out. But typically when you're in your armor and you're in the heat, your heart rate's going to be elevated anyway. So you need to train yourself to be able to sustain homeostasis, which is just basically your body's natural ability to maintain where it wants to maintain body temperatures, heart rates, food intake, etc., 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 to maintain for your body to be happy. Essentially, is homeostasis. And if it can't maintain that, that's when you start to get overclocked, you get overheated, you get migraine headaches, you get dehydrated, and why all those things are so important. But physical conditioning also plays a major role in that. And so being able to run 3 miles or run for, I don't even want to say 3 miles, but you want to be able to move for 45 minutes to an hour or more for that duration and keep your heart rate between 45% of its max and to 65% is why sustained cardio is really important to fighters as well. Now, let's go into a little bit of the science behind it. So when you think of a marathoner, honestly what I would do is I would Google what's the difference between a marathoner and a sprinter and see the two pictures. A sprinter, like I said before, is going to be more muscular, more defined, and a marathoner, somebody who's trained for sustained cardio conditioning, is going to be a lot leaner, a lot skinnier. They might even look more sickly, not sick, but you know what I mean, just thinner, not as much muscle, and that's because they're using type 1 muscle fibers. And those muscle fibers are, like exactly what I was just describing, thinner, longer, more elongated. They're also more oxidative, which means they burn fuel a lot slower because they have to go for extended periods of time. So carbohydrates aren't exactly the best fuel for that. Now, with that being said, yes, they do help, but your body's going to just burn them slower, or when they need it most, when your heart rate spikes, that's when they're going to be burning more carbohydrates. They actually burn more fats because fats are they're harder to digest, but they're also they give a more sustained energy for an extended period of time, which is why it's so important it's not important, but why if you do any research on people who do 100+ mile races or 24-hour races or 4-day races or anything like that, that there's been some cases of people just bringing olive oil and drinking it for the calories, A, for the energy, and B, for the fats, because they're burning more fats than they are carbohydrates at that point. So types of workout for that is going for a long run, going for a run for 45 minutes to an hour or more. You don't really need to do or more unless you're training for something specifically, for like a marathon or something that's going to take you more than a couple hours. That doesn't mean you don't have to go for a run if you're going to be fighting from like 10 a.m. to 2 or 3 p.m. like SCA or Penzik. You don't need to run that whole time to simulate that. You can condition your body to maintain if you just go for an hour, 45 minutes, and try to get your heart rate up to 45% to 65% and maintain it for the duration of 45 minutes to an hour. That's pretty much all you're going to need to start out. And then you'll also notice as you start training that part of your body that your distances will be longer over the course of time. So that's why I recommend doing both of them. But before we go into that, I should backtrack a little bit and say other types of workouts. If you're going to do like rowing or on the Stairmaster or something like that, definitely go slower pace. Like I said, make sure your heart rate is at 45 to 65%. And a good way to tell that is if you start struggling to have more of a conversation than I'm talking now, then you're starting to get into the 65% or more, and you need to slow down just enough that you can maintain a good conversation, but you have to focus on one or the other. Focus on what you're doing or focus on the conversation. And you want to focus on what you're doing, but you can hear the other person talking or doing that, so on and so forth. That's a good way to gauge where you're at. And again, if you can't maintain a conversation with somebody and you're going for a sustained run, then you know you're going too hard, going too fast, and you need to slow your roll and open your mouth a little bit more. So, excuse me, a little under the weather. Moving forward, this is why it's important to do both of them, because when you're in the moment of fighting and you have those small bursts, your body, you need to be able to adapt quickly and recover quickly in mid-fight, so you don't overclock yourself, you don't overwork yourself, and then you end up losing the fight because you're gassed out 30 seconds into the fight. So high intensity interval training, that's a key player in that portion of it. So you're going to burst, fight, and then when you separate out and you take a breather and you look at the opponent, and then when you're gauging and recollecting and reevaluating what's happening in the fight, your body's at active rest. So that's why it's important to do high intensity interval training. And then on the flip side of it, when you're going for extended periods of time and you're fighting for multiple hours at a time and your heart rate is elevated to that 45 to 65% that we were talking about, that's when you need to make sure. That's why the sustained conditioning comes in, as your body's already accustomed to working at that heart rate, and you're not going to overclock yourself, and your body's going to be able to maintain homeostasis a lot easier for the duration of the fight, and you're not going to get gassed out or have a lot more injuries because of that. So those are my two reasons. Those are my quick theories on why it's important to do both of them. You can overtrain one versus the other, and if you have to choose between the two of them, I would definitely stick with the high intensity interval training, because you're going to have rest periods throughout the day during your fighting. So it's not as important to do the sustained conditioning, but if you want to be the most well-rounded fighter, definitely do both of them. And again, if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to drop them in the comments, message me on Facebook, message me anywhere you see this linked, and let me know. And I hope to do more content like this. If you liked it, make sure you hit that subscribe button and let me know if there's anything you particularly want to be videoed. Thanks, guys. See you later.